Moira Trevelyan had spent most of her 32 years walking the rack line of Cornish beaches with the same quiet devotion others reserved for church. Dawn or dusk, sun or rain, she stalked the tide line with a canvas satchel bumping her hip, looking for sea glass softened by decades in salt water. Nothing soothed her like the click and rattle of the shards she collected. Greens from mineral water bottles, ambers from old beer flasks, rare sapphires from apothecary vials. She tumbled them, drilled tiny pilot holes, wrapped the edges in silver bezels she hammered herself, and sold the finished pieces from a whitewashed studio perched above St. Ives Harbour. Her reputation had grown beyond the peninsula in recent years. Tourists emailed months ahead to commission anniversary pendants or bridesmaids' bracelets. Collectors flew in from London and Switzerland to handle the polished fragments as if each were a misplaced galaxy. Even so, Moira's life stayed measured. Mornings on the sand, afternoons at the bench, evenings with a mug of tea as she updated her website. Things changed only when she met Leon Hart. Leon arrived one February squall, banging the studio door with enough force to rattle Moira's tray of cabochons. "Sorry," he called, dripping rainwater onto the oak floorboards. "I heard you buy directly from beachcombers. Thought I'd bring my stash before I move on to Wales." Leon possessed a smile as wind-blown as the dunes above Merina Cove. His accent was West Country, but lighter than the granite-heavy lilt of locals nothing Moira could place. He carried 2 plastic tackle boxes lined with nautical charts, each cubby holding sordid glass. Milky white, bottle green, cobalt, lavender, and a rare cluster of black that showed its color only when held to the sun. He named their origins with a dealer's relish. This one from a Victorian seltzer bottle, tossed by the steamer that wrecked off Wolf Rock in 1899, that is. And this amber, likely a morphine vial from the field hospitals over in the Isles. His knowledge impressed her as much as the shards. They haggled, drank instant coffee, and laughed about tourists who thought sea glass was made in a machine. Before leaving, Leon offered to act as her eyes along the coast. "Cornwall's long, and tides reveal different treasures every mile," he said. "I've a camper van, no fixed address. Why not let me bring the rare stuff straight to you?" Moira hesitated. Part of sea glass work was the hunt, but commission deadlines loomed and winter weather made wading among waves decidedly less romantic. She agreed to an informal arrangement. Leon would text photos of finds, deliver once a fortnight, and they'd settle up in cash. It went well for 3 months. Leon's batches grew ever stranger, orange slivers from warning beacons, butterscotch yellow shards from Depression-era tableware, a triangular piece of deep teal whose edges flashed almost metallic. Moira held that teal shard against the workshop lamp, transfixed. It measured 2 inches long, curved on one side like a cresting breaker, and jagged on the other where it had fractured. The surface shimmered beneath crazed patterns of bubbles. "From Bristol Channel, I reckon," Leon said, rocking on his heels. "Storm dredged it near Portreath. Looks like flash glass, the kind Victorians layered to create stained windows." "Flash glass fades," Moira replied, mesmerized. "This hasn't." "Maybe it's charmed," he teased. She paid an embarrassing premium, then shaped the shard into the centerpiece of a pendant. Rather than wrap the edge entirely, she soldered minimal silver prongs so the colors would glow unimpeded. She strung it on a slender chain, photographed it against driftwood, and posted the image online with the caption, "Mermaid's Lament, one of a kind." The pendant sold within an hour to an art historian in Exeter, who planned to collect it the following week. Moira polished the silver to mirror brightness and set the necklace in a velvet box. She felt brighter herself, buoyed by the thought that the shard's secret sea-tumbled journey would now continue around a stranger's neck. 2 nights later, sirens woke her, echoing across the harbour like gull cries. She peeked between attic curtains and saw blue lights bouncing off stone cottages. Something serious at Porthmeor Square, she guessed. Then returned to bed, mind chasing possibilities until dawn. By breakfast, the rumour mill had a name. A break-in at the Penwith Contemporary, an art gallery 30 miles down the coast in Penzance. Moira listened to Radio Cornwall while twisting jump rings, learning that a burglar had smashed a tall, arched window in the rear courtyard and stolen a bronze maquette by modernist sculptor Dame Barbara Hepworth. CCTV revealed little. A hooded figure limping briskly in and out before alarms, fully armed. Police said the thief must have known the gallery's new security schedule. They were combing local hospitals, salvage yards, anyone who might repair a gash caused by broken glass. The window, an original from 1912, blown with double-layered coloured panes, was irreplaceable. Several shards remained on scene, but a sizable fragment was missing. Probably lodged in the thief's leg, theorized the news anchor. Moira shuddered and silenced the radio. A nagging anxiety dogged her as she cleaned drill bits, some prickle of recognition she couldn't place. That afternoon she walked into town for groceries. On the high street, a newspaper stand displayed the Western Morning News. Across the front page, dreaming spires shattered, with a zoomed-in photo of the broken gallery window. Moira stopped cold. The missing section outlined in red looked uncannily familiar. A scalloped curve on one side, a serrated fissure on the other, and surface bubbles like pinpricks across water. Her teal shard. Impossible, she argued with herself. Thousands of Victorian windows existed. Besides, Leon had found the shard near Portreath, or so he claimed. Yet the feeling persisted, fanning beneath her ribs like a bellows. She bought the paper and hurried back to the studio. There she laid the pendant's promotional snapshot next to the newsprint. Same curvature, same subtle gradation from blue-green to indigo. In both images, opacity blossomed from the center like frost. Moira's stomach knotted. A shard shaped by randomness might still coincide with the break, but patterning and color? That crossed coincidence into calculus. She opened her safe, lifted out the velvet box, and removed Mermaid's Lament. Under bright bench lights, the pendant gleamed like stormlight through seawater. She set a ruler over the news photo, took rough measurements, then measured the shard. Out by perhaps 2 millimeters, close enough to account for distortion in enlarged photography. A knock startled her. Leon stood framed in the doorway, blonde hair wind-whipped, clothes spangled with sand. Instinctively she snapped the box shut and forced a smile. "New haul?" she asked. "And a corker at that." He set down 2 jam jars brimming with striped glass cane. "But you look like you've seen a ghost. Everything all right?" "Fine," she forced out. "Just busy." Leon's attentive gaze lingered. She rushed through purchasing negotiations, felt his eyes flick to the safe as she stowed the jarred pieces. A pulse banged in her ears. When Leon finally left, whistling, Moira slumped against the wall. If Leon had supplied the teal shard, and that shard matched the gallery window, Leon might be tied to the break-in. But certainty eluded her. Maybe she projected suspicion because Leon was an outsider. Maybe she wanted to protect her livelihood by blaming someone else for coincidence. The pendant was due to be collected in 4 days. If she involved police and turned out wrong, she'd lose a customer, a friendship, and her peace of mind. That night, Moira researched flash glass, Victorian stained windows, anything to disprove her fear. Yet evidence compounded. Only high-quality double-layered blue-green stainers matched the gallery's description, rare in Cornwall except for ecclesiastical commissions, and evidently the demolished art gallery window. Even the bubble patterns in flash glass differed from soda-lime bottles. They clustered in lightning bolt streaks identical to those crossing her shard. Sleep evaded her. She kept replaying Leon's visit, his subtle glance at the safe. Was he checking whether the pendant had sold or whether she still possessed it? If he feared she'd recognize the shard, what might he do? By dawn, Moira had made a decision. She photographed the pendant from several angles next to a ruler, printed the images, and drew up a letter explaining her observations and relationship with Leon. Then she phoned Detective Sergeant Rana Pole, the officer heading the gallery investigation, whose name she'd read in the paper. DS Pole arrived by mid-morning. She was small, crisply dressed, and radiated a pragmatic patience Moira immediately trusted. After introductions over tepid tea, Moira unlocked the safe and placed Mermaid's Lament on a suede pad. The detective donned nitrile gloves, then examined the shard under a loupe. "You say this arrived from Mr. Leon Hart early March?" "First week," Moira confirmed, twisting her mug. "He said he found it on the beach near Portruth." "But you believe it may originate from the Penwith Contemporary's historic window?" "I don't merely believe." Moira tapped the printed photographs. "Look at the serration pattern. It's missing precisely this sawtooth, right here." Paul scrutinized the newsprint and nodded. "That is compelling. We found 80% of shards inside the courtyard, the rest scattered outside. Forensics indicated an inward strike, likely with a crowbar. Then the thief collected bigger fragments to avoid leaving evidence. One piece unaccounted for. This could be it." Moira's stomach seesawed. Some treacherous part of her hoped the detective would find an obvious difference, exonerating Leon and her own judgment. Instead, Paul slipped the pendant into an evidence pouch. "I'd like to take this to our lab for fitment analysis," she said. "We'll create a transparent overlay tracing the break edges. If it matches, the shard becomes Exhibit A." "And Leon?" Moira's voice cracked. "We'll speak to him discreetly. You did the right thing bringing this forward, Miss Trevelyan." After the detective left, adrenaline deserted Moira, leaving her limp. She closed the studio early, walked headlong into a mizzle that tasted like salt tears. Evening found her curled on the sofa watching gulls swirl past her attic window. 2 days later, DS Paul phoned. "The shard is a 100% fit," she announced. "Even microscopic striations align. We've placed Mr. Hart under surveillance. Would you be willing to assist further?" "How?" "We've grounds for a search, but need to locate the stolen sculpture first. Hart vans bits of antiques along the coast. He might hide it in his vehicle. We want to lure him into discussing Providence, ideally to see if he kept other shards, or the crowbar. If you arrange to buy glass, we can record." Moira's tongue glued to her palate. She'd never worn a wire. The closest she'd come to espionage was hiding pasties from her brother. But Leon had betrayed her trust, endangered her business, and damaged cultural heritage. She agreed. The sting unfolded the following afternoon. Officers concealed themselves in an unoccupied pottery studio adjoining hers, microphones feeding to a van outside. Moira sat at her workbench, pretending to sand silver, though her hands shook. Leon arrived punctually, a canvas duffel slung over his shoulder. He smelled of diesel and brine, yet something metallic lingered beneath. Blood? She shivered. "Morning, Moira. Got a set of Victorian lilac for you." He set the duffel down, producing a padded roll of foam. "Picked them up during low tide at Mouse Hall. Storm-churned wonders. Looks promising." She swallowed, flipping open the foam. Inside lay lavender shards, yes, but her eyes snagged on a different item. 2 chunks of rusty glass, still bearing lead. Came's the strips once joined to a window. The colour matched the teal shard. "Are these from the same batch as before?" she asked, voice restful, though her pulse thundered. Leon shrugged. "Could be. I found them nearby." "I'd love provenance details." She picked up a piece, careful to keep it in frame of the camera hidden in a lamp. "Clients increasingly ask." Leon's gaze darted to the pottery door, unaware an officer listened inches away. His easy charm fissured. "You know, origins are fuzzy. Tides shuffle things for decades." "True," Moira said softly. "But some of these bear lead lining. That suggests a window, perhaps from a building recently damaged." He stiffened. "What are you implying?" Moira set the shard down. "Only that if anyone traced them, they might fetch higher prices." Leon exhaled, forced a casual grin. Right. Well, speaking of price." From the recording van, DS Paul sent a message to Moira's phone. "Keep him talking about where window came from." Moira read the text surreptitiously. I read about that break-in at Penwith Contemporary, she ventured. They lost a lot of glass. Imagine jewelry made from such history. If someone salvaged a chunk. He paled, the first crack in his composure. Police guard that place, doubt anyone pocketed shards. Still. She let silence thicken. Outside, squalls battered the harbour wall. Funny thing, though. My teal piece. She reached for an empty pad where Mermaid's Lament normally sat. A buyer wanted it, but it's gone. I thought perhaps you'd taken it since it matched these others. Leon's nostrils flared. I've never touched your stock. But you looked at the safe last visit, she persisted, noticing damp sweat at his temples. That's insane, he snapped. Footfalls pounded outside, distracting him. His gaze flew to the door as if weighing escape. Moira said evenly, Leon, did that shard come from Penwith Contemporary? His shoulders sagged, then straightened with defiance. All right, I found wreckage behind the gallery after the storm. Glass everywhere. No crime collecting rubbish. The burglary preceded the storm, Moira stated. Police know. Leon lunged toward the duffel. The pottery door burst inward as officers flooded the studio. Leon swung his bag, scattering glass like shrapnel. A shard sliced Moira's forearm. She yelped and backed away. Within seconds, the officers pinned Leon to the floor, cuffing him. Bastards, he roared. I'm an artist. That Hepworth should be displayed for all, not locked in a rich man's vault. Moira pressed a rag to her bleeding arm, heart hammering as D.S. Paul entered. You're safe, the detective assured, then crouched to Leon. Where's the sculpture? Leon glared but said nothing. Paul motioned to a constable, search his vehicle. Within half an hour, they hauled from Leon's camper van a tar-stained lobster crate. Inside lay the bronze Hepworth maquette, swaddled in bubble wrap, its patina dulled by seawater but otherwise intact. Alongside it, officers found crowbars, gloves, and several more teal shards. The evidence was conclusive. As police vans drove away, blue lights flashing across the darkening harbour, Moira sat on the bench trembling. D.S. Paul returned with a paramedic who cleaned the cut and taped gauze. You were brilliant, Paul said. Recovered art, established chain of evidence, and no serious harm. Moira managed a wan smile. I'd rather have been sketching ring designs. Compensation will come, Paul promised. The gallery's insurance covers rewards. And your buyer? She can still have the pendant once it's released from evidence. Moira examined her bandaged arm. I might remake the setting. That shard deserves a mount as honest as its story. Weeks later, Mermaid's Lament returned to her studio, now accompanied by a letter of thanks from the Penwith Contemporary and a cheque hefty enough to cover a new kiln. Moira remounted the shard in gold, added a discreet hallmark etched with twin initials, MT for her, PC for the gallery, and wrote a postcard to the Exeter art historian explaining the piece's enhanced provenance. On the day the client arrived, sunlight dazzled the harbour. The woman clasped the necklace round her throat, awestruck. Imagine, wearing a bit of history that foiled a crime. Moira thought of tides grinding human folly into treasure, of how beauty sometimes exposed wrongdoing. She pictured Leon in a cell, perhaps regretting, or perhaps justifying his act. And she thought of the teal glass itself, once window, then weapon, then adornment. Sea glass reminds us everything broken can be remade, she said, fastening the clasp. And every story eventually washes ashore.